Hi, Monique. Uh, hey, Jamie. Awesome. So you can hear me okay? Get down. Get down. It's okay. It's one of my favorite shirts. It was too hot for that. um, so I guess I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to read some poems from Phantom Tongue, which is my book that came out a little while ago. And after that, I'll read some newer poems, and then we'll have some time for questions afterwards, if y'all have any. Okay, so this first poem is called Joshua Tree. Even with its trunk arched back and boughs splayed out like fingers extended from an open palm, I'd never mistake this position for praise, though its name is biblical like my own. Stephen, the first man to die in God's name, chosen by my mother who didn't want my name to sound Mexican. Spanish is dirty, she says. Dirty as the soil that insulates roots, dirty as my left hand after writing in pencil. And now, when I speak to anybody in Spanish, I'm an imposter. My thick accent breaks the legs beneath each letter and leaves my words disfigured like that first martyr after he was stoned and whipped, his face tilted toward the sky, warm blood escaping his mouth, open and silent. Okay. So, as you can probably tell from that poem, I'm what's called a pocho, which is someone who doesn't speak Spanish and is like Latino. And yeah, some of my poems talk about that. Here's actually another poem kind of related to race in a way. An apology to my body. Afraid of growing darker, like my mother warned, I slid her razor down my arm to remove the sun-beaten layer of skin, each pigment in my flesh trapping sunlight, like chloroplasts in the leaves of grapevines and strawberries. In the fields, she plucked the fruit like feathers from the back of her rooster, its head tucked between red and blue wings, the color of her hands bruised and swollen. I wanted to break that bird's neck, sever its skull from its spine, pull each vertebra from the flesh, and feel each rib snag on muscle tissue like deep-rooted weeds. I would hold the deflated breast in my palm and wash its soft skin, pale as my scars, the color I wanted to be. Okay. So this next poem I'm gonna read actually took place based on an experience I had at the border in California a few years ago, in San Isidro, just south of San Diego. Approaching El Arco, reloj monumental. They say the arch is visible everywhere in Tijuana, a sign just south of the border whose metal shines like a northern star for lost Americans seeking home. Even here, north of the border, I can see it bend into a halo, into the pink and purple buildings, rising like a silver sun over the border wall. That lean shadow stretching across this beach where children pass through cold iron bars. First their hands, then their arms and shoulders, each daring the next to go one limb further. The bravest keep one foot on this side, one on the other, and the border bisects their bodies. It almost seems to vanish from chipped paint that reveals a blue undercoat, pieces of sky to hold between their fingers. ¿Quieres un elote? A man asks from the other side. I say, no gracias. He says something else I don't quite understand. A border patrol officer points at me, flexes his finger, and warns, you can't stand on this side of the fence. This is American property. Why are you here? Show me identification. Like a parrot, I repeat his question, each barbed syllable twisting from my throat. A gull walks in circles a few feet away, his left wing broken, upside down. His white remix makes a path in wet sand that 3 offspring follow. I could hold the gull, stroke his sleek back, and make a purple sling from my shirt. But I wouldn't know what I'm doing, how to reset or mend his bones. I would just break another one, I try to convince myself, even though I know what happens if I do nothing. I imagine my grandmother's voice filling my throat, sana, sana, culita terana, but I can't remember the rest of it, the incantation that could heal anything. Where were you born? Who do you know on the other side? I articulate 2 words, California, nobody. I can barely even speak Spanish. Turn around and raise your arms. The children observe me and my silhouette hangs from the wall's barred shadows. Presses his hand against my body, pats my calves, searches my thighs, cups my crotch, and pauses. You can leave. Walking across the beach, my feet sink. I try to step inside the footprints of others and notice another goal, this one dead, tire treads marking his body, his neck snapped into a parabola, Tijuana's arc crossing his flattened chest. So this next poem I'm going to read actually might be kind of fitting. I hate the sound of my own voice, and so knowing that this is going to be like this is being recorded and it'll be saved for later makes me feel really nervous. And this poem is kind of about like hearing your own voice. The anatomy of your voice. Only you can hear the rattle of bones inside your voice. The skull's tenor tucked around the alto of your vocal cords, like the drumhead of a tambourine, the dense beat of a palm striking skin. At 10 years old, you hear yourself on an answering machine and realize why kids call you fag. Your vocal cords aren't strings on a cello and aren't steel-braided cables suspending a bridge. Their membranes slit in your throat like silver zills and a tambourine ringing. Whenever you speak, remember to inhale as if through the gills on either side of a shark. 7 and 7, 2 halves of a sonnet that can turn an ocean into breath. I'm just going to read a few more poems. This one's about Calafia. In case you didn't know how California got its name, one of the urban legends is that California was named after this warrior goddess from one of the Native American populations that lived here, who had this story that was kind of like, she's like this really badass warrior that like kind of fought and wrestled with the conquistadors. And so this poem's about that a little bit. Calafia. My mother points at the black vase glistening under halogen bulbs, its cracks sealed with gold streams that almost trickle. It's beautiful, she says. I want to take this for her, hold it between my hands so that its gold could sieve through my lifelines as if they were mesh wire in a miner's pan, filtering gold from my own body and blood that I could give my mother, gold I could return to her joints. She smiles, sits, and rubs her knees. Keep looking. There isn't a cure. Her immune system excavates cartilage, creates canals around her patella, fibula, and femur. Her antibodies are rabid vigilantes like California's 49ers, staking claims inside her marrow. Rings reflect light from her hands like a pair of silver gauntlets. Her necklaces glint like chainmail. And I remember who my mother is. The warrior who grappled with my father, who taught me to solely use English like a shield to protect me from the boys who taunted the color of my skin. I don't want to believe in Calafia. If she lived and shared our bloodline, the conquistadors and miners share it too, as if they're the reason our bodies spend our entire lives destroying their own cells. Its only method of healing. With each year, my mother's walk slows, despite the rheumatologist inoculating her joints with steroids like molten gold. But she says it feels more like ice, the sensation of each approaching storm that makes her joints swell, as if her bones are the clouds surrounding thunder's crack, the sound of her walking. I'm gonna read two more poems. And this next poem is actually a poem I wrote in response to the Pulse shooting in Orlando 2 years ago. The gunman. Imagine the 4 chambers of my heart, each loaded with a bullet. Each beat another revolution in my chest, my throat a barrel, my curled tongue a trigger. I believe in spirits, in every fag and queer I've heard and allowed to pass through my body and into the next. I believe in possession, believe each metal slug entering our bodies tonight is a history we can't escape, forged in factories across this country by men who feel threatened by love. And when I stare into my reflection one last time tonight, I know each pupil will become an exit wound. I've spent my life learning to lie to myself, but tonight the truth will enter my body, will hurt, will kill, will leave an echo. So I'm actually going to finish by reading a newer poem that's part of some other poems that are kind of interrogating like speakers who are more complicit in violence rather than being the victim of violence, because I think that's kind of important to unpack. And hopefully this will turn into like part of a larger collection too. Also, side note, this poem was inspired also by a poem by Sam Sachs. On birth. My mother shows me a naked woman splayed across the page, a fetus tucked inside her. The description states, superficial view of mother and child. She explains how her stomach swelled, shows me the stretch marks clawed across her skin, and places my small hands upon them. Da Vinci dissected cadavers, sketched the mysteries of anatomy in red and black chalk, a uterus shaped like an ankh, a fetus curved into prayer, an umbilical cord wrapped around it. On a second-hand chalkboard, she taught me how to write the alphabet, how to spell my name. Pink and green dust caked the side of my left hand. It's okay, she said. Now you get to keep your words with you. Artists became anatomists, hoarded their discoveries, forbade women from seeing what their bodies kept, forced midwives out of hospitals, out of medical school, ensured scalpels, like pens, could only be used by men. For over 1,000 years, doctors performed cesareans, knowing no mother survives. For 22 hours, he induced labor and blamed my mother. Try harder, push harder, as if she were singing, her throat struggling to reach the next octave. She remembers all of my birthdays, the curve of each cake, the crescent scar beneath her navel, the moon she always carries. I begged her for a brother. The veins of his placenta pierced her uterine wall, nearly fused with her bladder. Blood filled her bedpan. I begged. Placenta procreta, when the placenta attaches itself to other organs. Likelihood increases dramatically after a cesarean birth, like mine. The doctor warns, you will die if you give birth again. I sat breech in my mother's womb, my head on her diaphragm, the closest I'd ever been to her voice. The more I pressed my ear against her, the harder it was for her to breathe. The doctor made an incision with his scalpel for the C-section, the first time I'd ever harmed my mother. My mother knows how to get the thread through the eye of a needle, find the thickest vein, replace a missing button, pierce skin, sew a torn seam, stitch a busted lip, drive with an oil leak, be a pregnant student, refill the oil in her car, inject an IV drip, ride on public transit, avoid air bubbles and embolisms, avoid eye contact with men, prevent leaving bruises, watch the bus driver in his rearview mirror, recall the location of every major artery, watch the last passenger leave, remember the test scheduled tomorrow, tell the driver to let her out, grip her nail like a scalpel, nail file like a scalpel, hear him say, "You're so beautiful," understand adrenaline's effects, understand his grin, throw her textbook, escape, start again. The doctor held her uterus like a crown, my brother's placenta an opal set in place by prongs of veins. He refused the hysterectomy, told her it's up to God, prayed for the ability to separate the two, navigated her anatomy from behind his loop like a jeweler, her body releasing rubies. We walked to her car parked down the street. I need to make sure to charge this when I plug in my phone tonight. Her fingers wrap around a pink taser, matching the nail beds of her new acrylics. In her other hand, keys poke out between her fingers. Everybody needs to walk like this at night. I laugh. No, really, you don't understand. A jogger runs on the same side of the street as me. I make eye contact, smile, and forget to cross the street. She changes her path. My mother learned the anatomy of a gun last summer, how to dislodge the breech and load a magazine, the weight of a brick in her hand, a piece of foundation worlds are built upon. The silhouette on her shooting range target had 6 holes in his chest, 2 in his head, and 1 in his neck. I imagined he was a robber coming after you and your brother. I couldn't take any chances. There were 2 bullet holes in the white space. At first, I just imagined scaring him, but he kept moving closer. Once, my mother threw herself on me, shielded me from my father, aiming encyclopedias at her back. My brother's kick reverberated from the womb into my shoulders, like the recoil of a gun, as if this is how violence is born. Thank y'all. I finished poem reading. So I guess this is time for Q&A. And also, I forgot to say thank you, everyone, for coming and joining the reading today. I get really nervous and I forget to do thank you sometimes, but seriously, thank you so much for being here today. So does anyone have any questions or anything? No questions? Oh, thanks, Gustavo. Oh, thanks for asking, Mandy. So if you want to find more of my work, you can go to my website. Actually, there's like links for all the poems available online. It's Steven Sanchez poetry.wordpress.com. And there you'll find links to some poems I have online, as well as like links to my book and my 2 chapbooks as well. One of which is actually through Agape Editions and is free to download. So like that's available too, which is really cool. Oh, that's a really good question. What's been the book that Sam asked? What's been the book that you've read in 2018 that surprised you the most, and why? Um, as some of I keep on talking to my friends about this book. I actually have it next to me. The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara. It's a novel written from the perspective of different members of the House Extravaganza. It's a novel inspired by Paris is Burning, and like it broke my heart so many times, but also felt so real. Like I don't know. I guess what surprised me most about it is like how real and authentic each character felt, and how they felt like their own people as opposed to like different manifestations of the same person, and like their interactions, and just like I don't want to ruin the ending, but the ending definitely caught me off guard. And I've been thinking about this book a lot because it kind of showed me not only how to address like grief and trauma, but also there's so many moments of joy in this book, and I think that's something that's really important to write about. And I'm still learning how to write about joy, and this book surprised me in that it showed me how to write about joy alongside grief in really cool and complex ways, and I'm really grateful for it. And against The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara. So are there any other questions? Oh, also, I didn't say thank you to Sam yet, but thank you, Sam, for organizing this and for um, like helping make this possible. Like this series is so cool. I'm really grateful to be a part of it. Oh shoot! Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize there are so many like questions after or things afterwards. Okay. So responding to Jay, must read selections for college students. Okay, so like must read selections for college students being introduced to literature. Um, gosh, one of the I don't know. I feel like there's like so many voices out there that are like so underrepresented. I feel like it might depend on like a class to class basis, depending on like who your students are. They might be lacking certain narratives that reflect their experiences that they don't get otherwise. Like some of the poems that I go to a lot actually for my students, because at the college I teach at, I believe it's 90% of the students are Latino, and a significant portion of those students are actually English as their second language, and so I have a lot of poems that actually code mesh Spanish and English. Um, One that comes to mind that I'm thinking of right now actually is um, gosh, I can't remember the name right now. Uh, it's in Lorianne Guerrero's collection, A Tongue in the Mouth of the Dying. She has a lot of poems in there that like interrogate like relationships to like being Latina and colonial um, narratives and colonial power, but in like really grounded ways, like preparing like lengua, preparing like food that's really familiar to a lot of my students. So I like using that poem a lot. Um, Also, I really enjoy teaching poems by Gary Jackson. His collection of poems, Missing in Metropolis, are a bunch of persona poems from the perspective of superheroes and supervillains. And so, like when I tell my students that, they become less resistant to the poems because I think a lot of them have like fear, like, oh my gosh, poems, I don't want to approach them. But that kind of lowers their guard, like, oh, X-Men, they can't be too scary. And then we end up having really great conversations about the craft that's going on. But yeah, I definitely would like, I always take into account like my students' backgrounds and like what kind of literature have I read that might reflect some of their experiences that maybe they haven't seen before. Okay, so what's next for my poems? Um, I'm not sure. I'm hoping to be surprised by them. Uh, I think I mentioned earlier, I'm really concerned about interrogating violence from the perspective of the person committing it, and not necessarily like gratuitous violence, but also like the microaggressions and like I guess the more subtle harms that we can cause people. Because Gary Jackson, who wrote the superhero poems, talked about how a lot of times poets resist writing from the perspective of like villains, quote unquote, because we don't want to see ourselves reflected in that. But I think it's really important, especially in like times now, to like see how we're complicit in these problems and complicit in these power structures and oppressive structures. And I'm hoping that my poems can help me like understand that better, my role and how I am either currently or have been complicit in it, so I can maybe be more conscious of it. um, so Brenda asks if I would have worn my polar bear onesie if it weren't so scary hot outside. Yeah, I would have. I think it's about 105 in Fresno right now, which isn't as hot as it could get, but it's definitely too hot for my polar bear onesie. But maybe someday in the future, I might. Okay, so Jamie asks, when do you start with image? When do you start with metaphor? When you start a poem? Huh. I don't know. I I mean, sometimes like I'll see something like my actual real life, then I'm like, oh, I want to write about that. So I'll write about the image and see like what it means to me or like why I'm so obsessed with it. But sometimes like it'll be more like a feeling I have or like some sort of like sentiment that I'm feeling that I don't know quite how to articulate. And so I kind of start thinking about that feeling or that emotion I have and I look at the world around me and see if anything sort of shifts for me. Like say for instance, if I'm angry, um, and like I'm sitting in, well, right now I'm sitting in like my apartment and there's like trees in front of the window. And if I'm angry and I'm looking at the trees, like how does that anger shape my perception of the trees? As opposed to if I was happy, how would I describe the trees? Or if how I was like, scared, how would I look at the trees? And so I think a lot of times like I'll have feelings that I don't know how to articulate. And so I'll try to look at the world around me or think about memorable things I've seen and describe it from that sort of emotional lens or emotional perspective to see if I can access some sort of metaphor, like deeper meaning in that. And a lot of times it just ends up being something that stays in my notebook and never goes anywhere, but sometimes I get lucky. Oh, thanks, Monique. Yeah, I didn't quite scroll enough. And thank you again, Sam. Uh, Jay says, love your answer on the that you just focus on the local context of students in a literature class. Um, yeah, definitely. And like, thank you for that question because I think that they can be super easy to get caught up in like, oh, I think these like they are the essential things that everyone has to read, but it might not always have the same sort of impact for different students depending on like where they're coming from. Monique asks, what poet do you wish someone would make a film about? Ooh. Um, I might have a couple of answers for that one. Definitely Adrienne Rich. Um, like she's one of my poetry heroes. Actually, one of my good friends, Amber, she bought me a St. Adrian candle, so I light it sometimes when I'm writing. Um, and I think like her body of work is so fascinating, and her political life was so fascinating, like the activism that she did. Like I remember in undergrad, my professor was talking about how Adrienne Rich actually would host like lunch gatherings for the Black Panthers in her own home, and like that sort of stuff would be so amazing to see depicted in a film. So I would totally see that like in a heartbeat. Um, I think another poet that, or another writer, or no poet, another poet that probably be interested in seeing a movie about. Mm, actually, I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about it, I might be kind of afraid because I wasn't a huge fan of the Allen Ginsberg movie, and I'm afraid that that might actually happen with other poets. But Adrienne Rich, for sure, I would love to see one of hers. uh, Thanks, Phyllis. My next book, I have no idea. Um, I'm slowly plugging away at it. I have a few poems that I think are possibly on en route to something, but we'll see. Awesome. And thanks, Gustavo. Cool. Um, so uh, I guess there's no more questions. So I just want to say thank you again, everybody, for joining and asking all these wonderful questions. And I just realized I probably wasn't making eye contact because I forgot to stare at the camera a lot of the times. Thanks for bearing with me. And I hope y'all have a good rest of your day.